Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about what to do when you've been autofilled, as that's never a good place to be. It especially sucks even in ranked, which the new ranked season is going to be starting very soon, and I'm sure there will be a lot of players out there, especially you guys, who may or may not end up getting yourselves in a position where you are autofilled. Now, the first thing to do is to not panic when you see that dreaded "you have been autofilled to X position," because I have a few tips and tricks here to maximize your value while playing in a position that you don't normally play. Now, the first thing to consider is, are you really autofilled? Because there is always the ability to communicate with your team and see if you can't maybe get out of that position. I've found that asking your team politely to swap, saying, hey, real quick, can I swap off jungle for something else? Jungle is my weakest role. That 9 times out of 10, your teammates will be willing to work with you. Now, you may not get the role that you've specifically requested. So if you're like, I would really love to have top lane, can I swap off? That you may not get top lane, but you may at least end up getting another position, right? Your jungler might, or your support might be able to say, hey, I'll totally take jungle off your hands if you don't want that, right? If that's your worst position, even if your top laner isn't willing to give you top lane or whatever your preferred position happens to be. The other thing that might happen is a lot of times they'll say, yeah, okay, sure, we'll swap, because the biggest thing to realize is that your team only has your best interests in mind. No one wants to hear that a person on their team is playing their worst position, because that's really bad. You don't want a teammate who's just in a really bad spot, who's playing a position they don't normally play, right? That's a really, really terrible place to be in for a lot of teams. So most often, if you communicate with your team and ask politely, they will help you and get you out of your worst possible role. However, you may not get a swap, right? Your teammate might say, I'm also bad at jungle, so I can't take jungle from you. Or they may just say, hey, I really, really want to play top lane. I have a good idea for a counter pick. I'm on this kick, whatever it happens to be. You may not get a swap. And in that case, there's really nothing you can do at that point. You will have to suck it up and play an auto-filled game. But that's not the worst thing in the world. At least you did try. At least you were polite about it. And your team will sort of be able to give you some degree of respect or some degree of credit, because they'll realize, yeah, okay, this guy was filled, and at least he contributed, at least he helped, at least he told us in advance. So if he isn't doing very well, he told us in advance this was his worst position. So you basically accepted that you're going to be autofilled, and you are going to have to play whatever your worst position is. Who should you be picking here? Because this is an important decision. Now, if you have a champion pool, like I discussed a couple of weeks ago in a video, then you should be trying to pick a champion from your champion pool. You should have at least 1 or 2 picks for every single position. So it should be the case where you say, okay, I ended up in the jungle. One of my filled picks is Xin Zhao. He's in my pool, so I'm just going to pick up Xin Zhao. Now, that's not always a possibility. Maybe your pool consists of either contested champions, or maybe randomly one of them got banned, who knows why, or maybe it even got picked away. So there is a possibility that you end up in a position where you can't choose something out of your pool, or if you don't have a champion pool, where you may have never even considered, okay, what do I do if I have to end up playing in support, for example? I literally don't have a champion. The biggest key here is to pick a champion that's easy to play and has a wealth of utility. Both of these are very important here. The easy to play bit is because even if that champion, let's say is a 100% counter pick to whatever the enemy team has chosen, or if the champion is totally broken right now, 60% win rate, there's no reason to not play this champion, it can still be a bad idea to play them, because you might end up in a position where that champion is slightly harder to play, or you've never played them before in your life and you don't know how to handle or how to execute certain things on their kit. Azir is a good example. Even if Azir's like 100% counter pick to whatever the enemy mid laner chose, if you don't know how to drift on him, if you don't know when and where to use his ultimate or his passive, or how to manage his soldier placement, you may end up not doing well at the champion at all, right? If you can't mechanically execute on the champion, then it doesn't matter if they're supposedly this super good counterpick champ. It just will not work out for you in the long run. The other thing to consider is you need to know why that champion is a counter pick, or why that champion is good. If you don't know why that champion is good, then there essentially is no reason to play them, because you might not understand why they're a good counter pick, why they have this ability to just sort of completely eliminate this lane. So, like I said, you need to make sure that you kind of understand the champion, and that's where the easy to play comes into, because even if you've never played a champion like Caitlyn before, she's not that hard to figure out. I'm sure you've seen enough Caitlyn's before in your time playing League of Legends, or at least can kind of look at her and say, yeah, okay, I sort of get how this champion works and what this champion's tools are. The other thing to consider is that the champion needs to have a lot of utility. This should be things like they have crowd control effects like stuns or slows or roots. They should also have things that they can contribute to the team that essentially don't bother scaling with damage. Things like increased movement speed buffs or shields or heals. All of these are sort of utility effects that, yeah, they may not make you the most killy thing in the world, but at least they give you something that you can contribute to the rest of your team. And the reason for this is that if you do fall behind, which is a possibility, right? You're playing a champion that you don't normally play, you're playing a role that you don't normally play, it does at least give you the ability to have some degree of help for your team. So even if you're going 0-3 in lane, at least you are going to contribute something to everyone else, right? That's the biggest reason for trying to find a champion that has utility. Now, that sounds like, well, what are champions that are easy to play but still do a lot for the team? There are more of them than you would expect. Generally speaking, they're going to be things like tanks or especially like utility mages. Orianna and Seraphine are two champions that should immediately spring to mind. These champions are very easy to play. They bring a lot of utility to the team. They're sort of able to just sort of neutralize a lane and exist and not worry too much about having to get ahead earlier, mechanically execute right. They're going to do something useful for the team almost regardless. Other examples for other positions can be things like Caitlyn for AD carry, Maokai or Nautilus for jungle or top lane respectively, even Nunu and Willem, they're not that hard to play. All of these champions are sort of champs that you can pick into almost any situation, and they're going to get value, you're going to be relevant no matter what happens in the game, there's going to be something useful that you will be able to contribute to the rest of the team, and also the champions like these are able to neutralize lanes really effectively. Like, they don't have a lot of counter picks. There are very few champions where you can pick Caitlyn and the enemy team picks a certain bot lane or a certain AD carry and you're like, oh wow, I'm 100% counter picked, I'm just going to straight up lose the game. That's not really how a champion like Caitlyn or Seraphine or Maokai really work. They don't have super hard counters like that. Now, you may not have the greatest time in lane, right? If you're playing Maokai and the enemy has picked Aatrox, okay, there's not a lot you're ever going to do to Aatrox. You will probably never kill the Aatrox as Maokai. But ideally, the Aatrox is never going to kill you because you should be super durable, super tanky, and when it comes down to team fights, even if the Aatrox does manage to get an advantage on you, you'll still be relevant for your utility and for your durability. And that sort of leads me right into the in-game section of this video, where the whole point of this is to play safe. You're not here to carry, you're here to be a role player. And what I mean by that is someone who shows up and performs what is expected of their role, right? So a mid laner is there to deal magic damage, wave clear, and provide utility, right? That's something that like every mid laner does. It's something that every mid laner can do, and it's something that you should be looking to do as your bare minimum, is show up and provide magic damage, utility, and wave clear for your team. That's all you have to do as the mid laner who's just sort of being a role player here. And that's sort of the thing about this, is that your team should understand that you got filled, especially if you did ask them politely in Champions, like, hey, can we swap off? This is my worst role. Your team is not expecting you to carry from that position. They're not expecting you probably to even go even, though, of course, they'd be very happy if you at least went even. They're really basically expecting you to show up and just do whatever you can, and it's sort of on the rest of the team to try and carry you. And that's sort of something that teammates should acknowledge and should realize is like their lot in life at this point. And so they shouldn't be flaming you too much, and it sort of takes a lot of the pressure off of you. You don't need to worry about, executing that powerfully. All you really need to do, like I said, is just show up and be relevant. So have a mindset focus on team play, and just try to remember that, even though you got auto-filled, there's no reason to not try, right? You shouldn't be saying, oh, well, I got filled, so whatever, I'm going to play Zed mid, and I might, go 0-10, but whatever, it was a filled game. There's nothing I could do about it. Ideally, you're still showing up. You're still at least trying to execute for your team. You're still trying to work with them, especially if this is ranked, because everyone has LP on the line, and nothing is worse than the team who realizes a member of their team just doesn't care about that game because whatever, I got filled. That never feels good. So, and likewise, if you're doing poorly, remember that you did get filled. There's no reason to expect that you are going to carry this game. There's no reason to expect that you are going to do super well, especially if you're playing a position that you have maybe played very rarely before. Like, you shouldn't have very many expectations on yourself for that because you got filled. You're not someone who normally plays that position. So be a little bit kinder on yourself and think about that when you do go into your next games, especially if it's a loss. You got filled, whatever, you have that fill protection. It should be good going forwards. But those are just my kind of advice and thoughts about being autofilled. Let me know what you guys think of all this down in the comment section below. Would love to hear your thoughts, especially if you have been filled recently and tried something like this. Let me know how that went for you. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.